This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Thursday, the 9th of September, the year of our Lord 2021. And we are in the midst of the early stages of the background to the terror atrocities of 9/11/2001. Each of you has something to write on in front of you, something to write with in front of you. You've got the note pack. You're on page 2. This is a skeleton. You may add notes to provide the living flesh of what it is I'm saying. And what we've done thus far is we have talked about the attacks themselves and how people speculated as to why they happened. And I tell you that the origins of these attacks and of the global war on terror go back almost 4,000 years. So, in the world's first civilization, ancient Sumer, somewhere around 1800 BC, Abram, a clan leader of shepherds, comes home to his tent near the Sumerian city of Ur, saying to his people, I have had an amazing thing happen to me. And the people said, what? And he said, God spoke to me. And they said, was it the goddess of lust? Was it the god of gambling or blackmail? It wasn't the god of plagues or war, was it? He said, no. God, singular, creator of all things, seen and unseen. Right! One God behind everything. One God made leprosy and puppies. Come on. There are many gods. It's obvious. To the ancient mind, polytheistic paganism was self-evident. Abram says, no. Omniscient, omnipotent, singular God. The Lord is God. The Lord is one. Right. So an all-knowing, all-powerful God chooses to talk to a person. Why you? Why not some king or high priest somewhere? Abram says, I don't know, but he did. Right. What does he want you to do? Well, it's what he wants us to do. He wants me and my people. That includes you, my wife Sarai. It includes the brothers and sisters I have. It includes their children. Sarai and I don't have any children of our own, much is the shame, more's the pity. And God wants us to leave here and go to a land that he has prepared for us and promised us. His people say, but the world is filled with barbarians, and we could die, and the road is harsh and full of terrors. And Abram says, right, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to brave all of this. Now, instead of traveling at 1 mile per minute on a paved highway with rest areas and with hotels and with restaurants and with fuel stations, Abram's people are traveling at the speed of a walking goat across the Mesopotamian desert, heading roughly northwestward away from Ur, away from the civilization in Sumer, towards literally God knows what. And when people ask, are we there yet? He doesn't just say no. He says, I honestly don't know where there is. God says that the important thing is that we go, so we went, but we'll learn when we get there. Yeah. To which his people don't have anything to say except, leave, because that's scary. Wandering in the wilderness without any idea of where we're going, that's rocky. That's rough. That's pretty harsh. So, you don't have to copy down. That's your copy. Chase. Your notes. These you can write on these. This is all yours.
You told me I should probably do that.
Well, she's a good student, so that could work too.
I trusted her.
There we go. Either way, I'm just letting you know you have options.
Who's computer?
Do what you want.
Gotta go with him on this one.
I'm not even getting involved. Except to the extent I already have. I'm so annoying. So, Abram and his people travel for years through hostile wilderness, occupied by bandits and tribes with precious little friendship. Eventually, they arrive in the land of Canaan, south of the Levant, on the southeastern corner of the sea in the middle of the land. That is Mediterranean Sea. Now, this land of Canaan is roughly here. Here's Egypt. Here's the greater Nile River Delta and the Nile River. Here are the various protrusions of the Red Sea. And the land of Canaan is roughly here. We've got the Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea. And so basically we're talking here. Now the land of Canaan is occupied by Canaanites. That's why it's called the land of Canaan. But God says to Abram, this is where, go to the top of this mountain, look around. All that you see will be yours and your posterities. Abram says, wow, posterity? I don't have any kids. I'm old. My wife is old. She's gone through menopause. God says, your posterity, you're going to be the father of a nation. Okay, Lord, if you say so. Not going to argue with God, but the fact is, he's old and his wife is well past childbearing years. Okay. In any case, he and his shepherds settle, and they begin trading with the Canaanites, and the Canaanites don't wipe them out. They should have. They don't. So, time goes on. And Abram and his wife Sarai are getting older and older, and the hope of having a child of his own, a son of his own, just consumes Abram and Sarai. So, a choice is made. There's a slave girl. And that slave girl could sleep with Abram. Now, a man remains potent throughout his life. A woman loses the ability to have children with menopause. Maybe this is the way God wants things to work. So, with Sarai's knowledge, if not with her joyous approval, so that Abram can be the father of a nation, Abram and the slave girl have relations. And what comes is a boy child. Wow. Boy child is old, he's sort of aggressive and violent, but he's a boy. And Abram realizes somehow that this isn't what God intended. That somehow taking Hagar, the slave girl, was not what God wanted. That it was an act of pride. That through human means, Abram was trying to finesse something that God had said that he would manage. And then Sarai becomes pregnant by Abraham. And they have a son. Abram's second son, Isaac. His first son by the slave girl Hagar is Ishmael. So, Abram's life is transformed. He is consumed by joy. God told him to leave his home, to lead his people to a new land. He did that. That required incredible faith, an incredible fortitude of faith, a willingness to trust everything to sense that you have an internal notion of what is right, because that's how God speaks to you, through your conscience. How many of us have the ability to sacrifice or risk everything that we care about for the sake of an internal motive like conscience? But that's what Abram does. Again and again throughout the journey, he listens to God who speaks to him through conscience. Finally, he has been rewarded with his beloved son. And his boys grow up. Ishmael, again, big and aggressive. Isaac, a little bit smaller, a little bit more studious. And then when Isaac is a child of 6, 7, God says to Abram, you take your boy to the holy mountain. Take him to the rock altar that you have used to sacrifice to me. Bring him up at night. Oh, and bring a sharp knife. God wants Abram to sacrifice an animal that he will find up here. God didn't say anything about bringing a lamb. Okay. Takes his knife, takes his boy. We're going for a walk. We're going camping. And they go up Holy Mountain to a place that has a big flat stone, which has been used as an altar. God says to Abram, take the boy, have him lay flat out on the altar. Abram does so. Now, take out your dagger and stab your boy to death. Sacrifice him to me. I can't convey to you just what kind of request that was. Abram was an old man who desperately wanted a son of his own. Ishmael, sort of, yeah, but not really, because of Hagar not being his wife. This is the reward God promised him. This is the means by which Abram will be the father of nations. This is what he got for being faithful. This is the thing he loves more than life itself. This boy. And God, who set all this up, and who made Abram do this, who encouraged Abram to do all of this, now says sacrifice him? In blood right? Lord is God. Lord is one. Stop! As Abram is in the process of striking the dagger into his son's chest, before it reaches his son's chest, as his son is looking up in genuine shock, because this is daddy who should be trustworthy, God says, stop, don't harm hair in that boy's head, put away your dagger, send the boy off to play, we've got to talk. So God and Abram talk while Isaac goes off and plays, and little kids are very resilient. It's not some, it's explained to Isaac later what happens. God says to Abram, you have proven to me your loyalty and dedication. Your willingness to follow me, all that other stuff was good. Your willingness to sacrifice the most beloved thing in your existence, your son Isaac, has proven to me that you are the right man. Let us make a covenant together. And the word covenant is important. The covenant made between the Lord God Almighty and Abraham was this. Yes, he is now Abraham. With the covenant, Abram's name changes to Abraham. When Sarai accepts the covenant, she will become Sarah. Abraham and his people will promise to learn from God and obey him. They will be in thought, word, and deed, to the greatest extent possible, his people. So the people promise to learn and obey. Note that. Covenant. People promise to learn and obey. People promise to learn and obey. That's the covenant. God promises to teach and lead. God promises to teach and lead. So this is a contract between man and God. And this contract, this fundamental agreement, is the basis of the three great monotheistic faiths. Because from the prophet Abraham comes the Jewish people and the Jewish faith. From the Jewish faith comes Yeshua bar Joseph, Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ, and the Christian faith. From Abraham, called Ibrahim in the Quran, comes the Islamic faith. Islam meaning submission to God. The prophet Muhammad is a successor to the prophet Abraham. Ibrahim, they call him. So, this is the beginning of a central aspect of our Western civilization. It is the beginning of the three great monotheisms. Monotheism, the word for God in Greek is theos. Mono means singular, so monotheism is the belief in one God. That's a vocab word. Monotheism, the belief in one God. So, next to the three great monotheisms in your notes, what I would do if I were you is I'd underline monotheisms, and I would write one God, because that's a belief in one God, but do it as you like. Now, you might say, in a very modern way, but none of this is proved, it's all faith. Yeah, not that you sound like it. Other people sound like it. Never you. No. You have much more dignified voices. Ancient people, to a much greater extent than modern people, didn't care about facts as much as they cared about truth. Facts have relationship to truth, but facts do not equate to truth in the ancient mind. Mainly because to ancients, they simply do not have enough facts to construct truths based on incontrovertible, objective, empirical, measurable reality. You have to take it on faith. In fact, you will find that the most important things in life have to be taken on faith. And I'm not saying that you're going to come to my conclusions and become a Christian, although you may already be a better Christian than I'll ever be. I'm saying this. Let's take a scientific truth, a scientific fact, should I say, that our star, Sol, the sun, is 93 million odd miles away. It is 8 light minutes away. If the sun were to have exploded, we wouldn't know it until 8 minutes after it happened, when the light would change and then the shock wave would destroy the Earth. The sun could have been destroyed 7 minutes and 58, 59, and we wouldn't know it until now. The sun is 93 million miles away. That is 8 light minutes. The universe is big. Light moves very slowly on a universal scale. Okay. That's a fact. You'll learn that in physics or earth science. Are you willing to live for that? Dedicate your life to the size of the solar system? Are you willing to risk your life for the proposition that the sun is 93 million miles away? Are you willing to kill in defense of your conviction that the sun is 93 million miles away? Or is it just a fact that goes in a big tome, a big science textbook, one of many facts? And there's faith. Communism is a religion. I don't think it's a good religion, but it's a religion. It has a dogma, Marxism. It has a priesthood, the inter-party membership. It has holy books, Das Kapital, the Communist Manifesto. It has an inquisition, whatever secret police exists in the communist police states. Its vision of God is the material universe. Its vision of the Messiah and the millennium is of the era of true communism, which is yet to come. It's a religion. But we're atheists. It's a religion. In functional terms, communism is a religion. It has all the panoply of every religion that has ever existed. When a communist says that the world has three eras of history: feudalism, which is the medieval economy that develops out of savagery, where most people are farmers and the nobility rule over them like predators. The second age of history is what we're in now, the age of capitalism, where factories have replaced the fields, and the nobility have been replaced by the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, the money men. But that the future, through blood and revolution, will be a communist utopia, from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. Oh, a world without greed, a world without poverty, a world where the dark side of human nature has been purged from ourselves. That is all part of the communist faith. But to believe that, you can't prove it. You can argue it, but you can't prove it to a skeptic any more than I can convince an atheist to believe in God. Or an atheist can convince me not to believe in God. Beyond a certain point, discussion and debate won't work. If you believe in God, it's either because you were raised to, or because at some point in your life you've encountered a moment that reveals to you God's presence, or that reveals to you God's non-existence. Ultimately, faith is something that you directly, personally encounter. You can hear about it from other people. You can practice religion, religious rites, rituals with other people. But to genuinely believe requires some kind of personal moment. Actually, probably several throughout your life. And at some point, you make a leap of faith and say, yes, this is true. Not because I can prove it, but because I believe it. And because my belief in it makes life worth living. My belief in it makes life worth living. My belief in this truth, whatever it is, whatever I've just made the leap of faith about, makes life worth living. It explains to me why bad things happen to good people, why good things happen to bad people, why we live, why we die, all that stuff. It is the meaning. Meaning is never a matter of fact. Meaning is always a matter of faith. Because you cannot prove your meaning to a skeptical audience. I cannot prove my meaning to a skeptical audience. No one. It's something you either believe or you don't. And the thing about meaning, the thing about truth, which is what meaning is a conviction that this is the truth of the universe. This is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. That's not 42. The meaning of things is something that we take a leap of faith about. In doing that, it gives us and our beliefs a vitality and a power that makes us worth living for the belief, makes it worthwhile to sacrifice for the belief, makes it worthwhile to risk death for the belief, because there are worse things than death, and makes it worthwhile even perhaps to kill in defense of that belief. 93 million miles, son, almost no one is going to be willing to live, die, or kill for that. But, like a communist would say, there's a brotherhood of all mankind, and so long as anyone is in poverty, we all suffer. And by the way, I hate communism, hate it, with an abiding passion. I have Cuban ancestors who were killed by the communists. I have Cuban relatives who are under the heel of the communists. But I am speaking of communism now as a religious belief as a philosophy that people are dedicated to, worth living for, dying for, and killing for. And the world has plenty of people dedicated to communism today. Their conviction that so long as any of us are in poverty, all of us are impoverished, is one of the things that they think is worth living for, dying for, or killing for. So, when you hear me talking about things like the story of Abraham and of Isaac and of the covenant, you might say, rightly, well, that's the history of religion. Yes. And we're going to be dealing with religions of all kinds. Religions, ideologies, philosophies, because they are the things. Belief, taking leaps of faith, they are the things that people find are worth living for, dying for, or killing for. Any questions so far? Comments, thoughts? Okay. So, Abraham and his descendants are now God's chosen people. They are the Hebrews. They are the Jews. Somebody open the door, please. Bug. Big bug. I think that was what I call a stink bug, which is a bug that if you crush, makes a terrible stench. Some of you know. So, Abraham's people live on the fringes of Canaanite society until, for several hundred years. However, there comes a time of famine. There comes a time of starvation. And first Joseph and then the other descendants of Abram travel into Egypt because there's food there. Because the Nile River provides bounty. Because this pre-classical river valley civilization, by getting flooded out and river muck on their farmlands twice a year, is a good place to be when there's famine elsewhere in the world. The Bible calls the period in Egypt a period of slavery. But there's a subtlety that I actually didn't appreciate until fairly recently. The Jews were treated functionally no differently than any group in Egypt. In Egypt, during the New Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and before it, the Old Kingdom, when the pyramids were built, in Egypt, there is the gods, there is the world of men, and the fulcrum, the joining point between these two worlds, is the God King, the Pharaoh. As such, Egypt in ancient times had a roughly stable population of about 4 million people, give or take. And that's a very dense population for the ancient world. So Egypt has about 4 million people. Of all those 4 million people, one of them has the kind of freedom to imagine and choose things, to command things, that we Americans take for granted, and that is the Pharaoh, the God King. And here's a secret. Even he's not free, because in most cases the Pharaoh is captured like a fly in amber by the rituals of the court. The Pharaoh cannot really make choices that vary too much from what the religion and the customs say. So even the Pharaoh is a prisoner in some respects. But more than anyone else, the Pharaoh has choice. So one man in 4 million, look at that proportion, has the power of choice. The people of Israel are sent to live in the land of Goshen, which is a borderland to the east of the Nile Delta, along the lower Nile River, just before it debouches into the Mediterranean Sea. And they become people who grow food for Egypt. They make bricks for Egypt, just like every other non-noble Egyptian does. But the Hebrews consider this a time of slavery. because they are a minority in another person's country. They are not of the Egyptian religion. They are a people apart. Their belief in their one God keeps them a people apart, whereas other groups that go into Egypt assimilate more fully. They become more Egyptian in thought, word, and deed. At some point, there's no distinction anymore. Everyone's an Egyptian. But from a Hebrew point of view, they are in bondage. They are in slavery. For hundreds of years, they are in slavery in Egypt. And in this slavery, they feel trapped, because slaves are, and they pray to God for a deliverer, for a man that will be sent by God to free them from bondage. And now we come to the story of Moshe, or Moses. Moses is born at a time when the Pharaoh's high priests and astrologers say that a great rebel will arise among the people of the Hebrews of Goshen. So the Pharaoh orders the death of the firstborn. The belief that the astrologers have is that this rebel, this deliverer, will be a firstborn son of an Israelite family. So he orders the Egyptian army into Goshen to kill everyone under a certain age who's a boy, especially those who are firstborn. But unless they can prove that they are a secondborn or a thirdborn son by saying, here's my older brother, kill him, any boy under a certain age is under threat by the Pharaoh's decree. It's what happens when you live in a tyrannical society. The government can decide that there are things more important than the lives of its people. It's why you should be happy to live in a republic like the United States. So, Amram and Yoshebel are a newly married Hebrew couple. And they have a daughter who was their firstborn. They have a son. That son is in danger. So, they arrange for their daughter to bring a basket down to the Nile River. In that basket are swaddling clothes, which are basically baby blankets and diapers, of a certain weave. Inside this basket is the baby. The baby is placed in the basket is placed in the Nile, and basically this child is left to the whims of God. Who knows what will happen? Will the basket eventually get swamped, get filled with water, and the baby will drown? Quite possible. Will the basket be bitten on by crocodiles, and the baby will become some crocodile snack? Quite possibly. Will the baby be lost in the rapids? Will the baby wash out to sea? Basically, it's like in the middle of a tornado where monsters are coming at you. You have your baby and you wing it into the air, hoping that it will have a soft landing somewhere, because if it stays here, it's definitely going to die. Downriver, a princess, daughter of Pharaoh, is frolicking with her maids, her retinue. And she's frolicking because she's miserable, because she's just miscarried. She's lost a child, a son. And she spots this thing in the reeds floating down the river. She orders her people away, and when the basket is brought to her, she claims the boy as her own, calling him Moses, which means a gift of the river. Moses is observed being claimed by the Egyptian princess by Moses' older sister, who was sneaking her way down the side of the river to see, at least for a while, what would happen to this kid. And Because she miscarried long ago enough, the princess of Egypt was no longer producing milk. She needed a wet nurse. And the little girl came up and said, I know a wet nurse. It's a Hebrew woman named Yoshebel. So Moses was in the house of the daughter of Pharaoh, claimed to be the grandson of Pharaoh by the princess of Egypt, and he is nursed by his physical, actual, biological mother. Moses grows up big and strong, Prince of Egypt. There are many stories, there are a few movies, but basically what is said about Moses is very limited. He simply grows up with the education of an Egyptian royal. And that education includes reading, writing, numbers, basic math, the priesthood, knowing how the temple rites work, military affairs, the government administration, basic economics. Moses is probably the best educated Hebrew ever in human history, up to that point. As a young man, Moses discovers his true identity. And what the Old Testament says is that he kills an Egyptian. He kills an Egyptian to save a Hebrew. Now, an Egyptian overlord has the power of life and death over the Egyptian people and over the Hebrew slaves. An overlord or an overseer who decides that a Hebrew slave must be killed is perfectly within his rights to do so. Moses kills an Egyptian overseer to preserve a Hebrew life. He is tried. He is convicted of murder because Moses is not allowed to kill an Egyptian anytime he wants. Not an Egyptian overseer. So Moses is exiled. He is sent across one of the bleakest wildernesses in the world, then and now. The wilderness of Sinai, named after Mount Sinai down here by the tip of the triangle of the Sinai Peninsula. Moses has to cross this wilderness with limited food and water, and it is a blasted desert rocky wasteland. Eventually, he makes his way beyond the Gulf of Aqaba to a land called Midian. Midian is occupied by the descendants of Ishmael, who are called Arabs. Midianites are shepherd people, just like Abraham's people were before they went to Egypt. And Moses takes on a Midianite wife. He becomes the heir of a Midianite sheikh named Jethro, and he begins leading a peaceful life of a shepherd in Midian. Until one day, Joshua, an escaped slave, a stonecutter, comes to Midian and says, "Why are you living in comfort here? Our people cry out for a leader. You are a Hebrew and a leader." And then Moses sees something on the holy mountain, which is not necessarily Mount Sinai, maybe Mount Horeb or something. Moses sees something on the holy mountain. So he puts Joshua aside and tells his family he's going up to see what this thing is. And as he gets closer and closer, it looks like a fire, but not a fire. It's a bush that seems to be a flame, but it's not being consumed by the flames. And as he approaches, Moses hears a voice that can only be God saying, "Take off your sandals, you stand on holy ground." The word holy means separate. Something that is holy is not a normal part of life. It is something kept aside special for worship or for God. So this is special ground. This is holy ground. So Moses takes off his sandals and approaches on his knees until God says, "Stop, let's talk." Moses is told that God has heard the prayers of Israel, the Hebrew people, and that God is willing and ready to send them their deliverer. Moses, that's you. To which Moses says, but Lord, I'm slow of speech. Moses had a speech impediment. You will not see this in most of the movies. Prince of Egypt, the Ten Commandments, they all have Moses being quite eloquent. But the Bible is very clear. Moses had some kind of speech defect, speech impediment. God says, who are you trusting here? Your own abilities as a speaker or me? I'm telling you, if you go there and open your mouth, I will provide you with the words. It simply requires your courage to follow my lead. Are you willing to trust me? Well, this is God talking to Moses. Moses says, yes. But Lord, and God says, don't worry, your brother Aaron will speak for you. Yes, you have a younger brother named Aaron, and he will speak for you. He will be your speaker. When you need to project your voice, you tell Aaron what to say, and Aaron will speak. Moses says, but Lord, the Egyptians worship gods by name. Horus, Osiris, Isis, Set. By what name shall I tell the people you are called? Now this is an important question, because in the ancient world, and in medieval world, and in modern magic, a name is a very precious thing. Remember, God creates with a word. The monotheists believe that words are powerful things. God says, let there be light, and there is light, and the light was good, and the evening and the morning of the first day. So, if that's the case, God's name would be a very powerful magical talisman. God's name could be used to conjure, invoke, summon. God's name could be a very powerful thing in the wrong hands. So Moses is asking a very, very loaded question. Lord, what is your name? God's answer is interesting. His answer is, I am who am. I am that am. I exist. Something like that. Basically, his answer is, I'm here. I exist. I am. I am. Which in ancient Hebrew is going to be written by Moses as something like YWH. Because the Hebrew written language of Moses' time did not have written vowels. Hebrew of Moses' time, as written, had consonants only. You try to imagine reading a language that has consonants only. YWH. The ancient Hebrews pronounced this Yahweh. Medieval English Christians call it Jehovah. Muslims call that Allah. But it is the name of God, or at least the way God taught Moses to call him. I am who am. I am that am. I am. I exist. Is the Lord. Says the Lord. Is his name. So Moses returns to Egypt. And in Egypt, he finds a people who are very hopeful but very fragile. The Israelites are, like all slaves, constantly in fear of their lives, of their children, of everything, because they are totally at the mercy of their owners, of their masters. Aaron spreads the word that Moses is the deliverer and he is going to get the people freed, which is something that is going to be a bad move in the short run. Moses goes to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is told by Moses, thus speak the Lord, let my people go. Now Pharaoh knows Moses personally. They grew up together. And Pharaoh laughs and says, why would I let my property go? No, get out of here. You're lucky I don't throw you back in prison, you murderer. No, they're my people. They're not going anywhere. So, Moses says that God will chastise Egypt with plagues until the people are let go. The Nile is poisoned by a reddish mud that looks like blood. The waters of Egypt are befouled. After that, there is a plague of frogs who leave the waters and go on to the land, of biting insects, of boils. There is fire that comes from the sky and falls like hail. The sky is dark at midday. Starvation, drought because there is no potable water, and disease become rife in Egypt. And again, Moses comes to Pharaoh, thus spake the Lord, let my people go. And the Pharaoh says no. But the Pharaoh is going to respond. He cuts the food supply to the Israelites by forcing them to not only grow what they need and make bricks, but to gather the straw for the bricks. To gather the straw by night, to make the bricks by day. In other words, he doubles their workload without increasing any of the time that they have to complete their jobs. The crowds of Israelites are now against Moses. Moses, you've brought doom to us. The Egyptians are blaming us for all of these plagues. Because you keep saying that God is punishing Egypt. So now Egypt is punishing us. Have you no concern for us? Have you no fear of hurting your people? So it's not all happy and light. Finally, the Pharaoh is close to weakening. But his wife whispers in his ears, what kind of man are you? Are you even a man to bow to slaves? What kind of Pharaoh are you to impoverish your son? And she points to his eldest boy. To impoverish your son by sending away his property out of fear. So instead of letting the people go, when Moses arrives at the Pharaoh's summons, Pharaoh says, no, I will never let your people go. To which Moses says, sooner or later, God will compel you. The Pharaoh says, a threat to the children of Israel. He makes a comment about the firstborn, which is an event that they both remember, the death of the firstborn back in the day. Moses trembles and says, out of your mouth your curse has been made manifest. The angel of death will come. But it will not come for the firstborn of Israel, it will come for the firstborn of Egypt. He leaves. Pharaoh, as he's leaving, says, if I ever see you again, you're a dead man. That night, the Jews are told to put lamb's blood on the posts and lintel. That's the sides and top of their door. The Jews are told to prepare a special meal of unleavened bread and bitter herbs. This will be the first Passover. When I was in junior high school, I was invited by a friend to his family's Passover, and it was an incredible experience. The food, the readings from the Bible, absolutely incredible. So they eat a ritual meal in preparation for leaving Egypt, even though the Pharaoh has not in any way indicated that they're going to leave Egypt. But Moses basically says this is going to be it. The angel of death has come. The story goes that anyone who does not have the post and lintels of their door bloodied sees their firstborn son die. This includes children, young adults. The Pharaoh's son falls into a coma. before dawn, the Pharaoh calls Moses. His heart is broken. Take your people, take your flocks, and go. Be gone. So that morning, the people of Israel gather under the 12 banners of the 12 tribes, and they begin to make their way into the wilderness as free men. That's where we'll leave things for today. Any questions, comments, or thoughts? Okay, then I will remind you that you guys, what is your next assignment on the syllabus? Can I borrow it? Okay. Tomorrow I'm going to give you the questions that I'm going to want you to write answers to for essays. But you don't have anything to do this coming Sunday. Really, good luck. Yeah. I'll expect to have you come by probably next week and talk to me during study lab if you're having any trouble about it. Try to get me those signatures by next week. Okay? Good luck.